Ubisoft continues to collapse. It's really on a very serious downward spiral, and the situation just got a lot worse since they have shut down XDefiant and 3 studios, San Francisco, Osaka, and Sydney. 277 people have been laid off, but the whole situation regarding XDefiant is actually quite confusing. This is one of the stranger things. There's a lot of inconsistencies going on here, and especially if we sit down to analyze the internal memos that have been leaked courtesy of Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson that I'm gonna be referencing in the video from Yves Guillemot and Marie-Sophie de Wabert. And on top of looking at all of this, I actually went to go play XDefiant, something that most people can no longer do because effective immediately. There's no new downloads, no new registrations for the game. You can only play it if you've already played it before, and the game will completely shut down in June, but they're still moving forward with Season 3 of the game. Again, very strange thing. We're gonna get into all of it, but I did go and play it for some B-roll footage, and that was not a great experience. This whole thing is a mess, but we're gonna dig into all of it. But first, hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, welcome back. If you enjoy the video at any point, remember to hit the like button. Helps the channel grow, all of that stuff. Let's get into it. So once again, XDefiant closing down in June, but you can no longer play it unless you are already playing the game, if you had it installed and had played it before. And those are pretty extreme measures to take with a game. And XDefiant was a pretty big bet and a huge investment from the side of Ubisoft for many years. It's a game that was in development for a very long time, kind of a passion project by Mark Rubin, which is one of the old Infinity Ward OGs back from Modern Warfare 1 and 2, an executive producer over there. And he really wanted and saw a vision in the shooter market, in the military shooter market, for a game that had no skill-based matchmaking, that was more like how games used to be back in the day, where it was just a free-for-all, much higher levels of skill present in every game mode, and they believed that Call of Duty needed good competition, which is something that I agree with, and it really did feel, as a game, like a passion project. There was a lot of passion put into XDefiant in ways that I personally found very surprising. The game had a little bit of a hero shooter aspect to it, with different factions, each of them coming from different Ubisoft properties, which sounds like the most soulless marketing gacha game thing you could imagine, but somehow XDefiant really made it work. Every single character had their own announcers and their quips and all of these different things going on that gave the game quite a bit of personality that otherwise it would be lacking. It was overall just a very impressive effort that, again, was the result of many, many years and reworks and development hell that the game was in. This is where the story gets really confusing, though. While we don't know the success of XDefiant, we can't see numbers of any sort. Normally, we have Steam to track public player numbers to some degree. Even when on consoles, we can't really check beyond something like top earners charts and things like that. At least from an anecdote perspective, XDefiant had a pretty healthy player base, at least in the betas, and at launch it had plenty of buzz. It had a pretty decent community forming, which I guess the new Call of Duty just completely took them off the map. Otherwise, it's really difficult to look at this situation and find it logical to shut it down, because there was a lot that was left to be done with XDefiant considering the investment that they had put in. I think it makes more sense to talk about this from the perspective of the leaked internal memos, one from Yves Guillemot and one from Marie-Sophie de Wabert, which shed some light on just how terribly Ubisoft is doing. This comes from Insider Gaming, and Yves' letter is pretty big, talking about how the situation is incredibly dire and how the company is struggling to maintain its own destiny put in its hand, and how they want to continue being a key player in the industry, a creator known for its unique and exceptional video games, which I think a lot of people would say that they've been very far from, very, very far from, for a pretty long time. I think that they're much better known for their microtransactions, for the copy and paste design of a lot of their games, for their aggressive monetization, for their live service ambitions, these sorts of things in recent years. So, I mean, it all just comes off a bit as corporate speak, but I do feel there's some nuggets in here of like, we're doing really our best. We're doing everything we can to stay financially solvent, to not sell to Tencent, basically. One of the more interesting parts of the memo comes towards the end, where he mentions that some members of the executive committee will reach out to you. Cécile Roussel will share new initiatives aimed at addressing some of the questions raised by Ubisoft XP. That is their huge internal survey, which apparently they received over 55,000 comments from the employees. But Marie-Sophie will present initiatives to bring back a daily focus on creation, ensuring fewer unnecessary processes and more time dedicated to what truly matters to each of us, making the best games possible. Elaine Core will provide updates on the launch of Assassin's Creed Shadows and progress made in strengthening our relationship with gamers, particularly regarding the Crew Motorfest and Star Wars Outlaws. And look, talk is cheap. That's the fact. But it would be nice for this to happen. I have never stopped saying throughout all of my coverage of Ubisoft and through most of my coverage of most game companies and the AAA bubble bursting and all of this, ultimately what I would like is for these companies to find a way forward, to change the way that they do things and evolve positively, for people to keep their jobs and be able to pursue their dreams, which is probably making really cool video games that we get to play. But talk is cheap, and the results of this sort of action, if it does happen, will be in many years' time, and maybe too late. The interesting part about Marie-Sophie de Robert's internal memo below is that it's focused more on XDefiant. Despite an encouraging start, the team's passionate work and a committed fan base, we've not been able to attract and retain enough players in the long run to compete at the level we aim for in the very demanding free-to-play FPS market. As a result, the game is too far away from reaching the results required to enable further significant investment, and we are announcing that we will be sunsetting it. And this is the part where I feel like this can't be true. Publishing the game on Steam is not a significant effort. This isn't a situation similar to Concord, where transitioning the whole game into free-to-play would be a significant investment. At the time, I even said that with the case of Concord, given its just ridiculously large budget, that maybe it was an investment worth doing, right? Teetering on the edge of a sunk cost fallacy. But that is not the case with XDefiant. XDefiant is a free-to-play game. All you would have to do is release it on Steam for 6 months and see if it garners a player base from which it finds stability. We know from industry insiders, from a lot of people within the industry that know specific data points, that putting a game on Steam can multiply its exposure by 10. Ubisoft and other companies before, a lot of them are just giving up on this fact, have historically not been on Steam or on other marketplaces. They want to be on their own launcher because they have to give a cut of the profit to Steam. And while I'm not 100% sure how that works in the case of XDefiant, given that you still have to go through Uplay even if you install it on Steam, it's still worth trying, and it was definitely worth trying to put this fully functional game on Steam. Even the investment of maybe making it work independently of the Uplay launcher, that might be a bit more complicated. I'll admit, I'm not fully versed in how tied to this launcher the game's backends are when it comes to like netcode or security or anti-cheat. Anti-cheat, we'll get there, don't worry. But I don't think it can be considered a significant investment. Either the numbers were absolutely the worst you could ever imagine for a game, or they're just looking to cut costs wherever possible. And again, I don't want to spend this much time talking about it, but if that were the case, they could have just said so. They didn't need to give this specific language in this case. They could have just said, in the continuing restructuring of the company, given our pursuit of not going into the ground, we have to make cuts, and this is one of the better ones we can make. But this paragraph of, not doing any more significant investment, to me rings very hollow, and it's very unfortunate and sad. She then goes on to mention that games as a service experiences remains a pillar of our strategy. Don't forget there's a ton of Assassin's Creed service games coming soon. But she does mention that they've been successful with things like Rainbow Six, The Crew, and For Honor, which I guess those games are financially stable. Those are in that Goldilocks region, those 15 to 20,000 players that can support their continuous development. XDefiant, not the case, I guess. Although also all those games are on Steam, but you know, let's pretend. And globally, we are determined to take the necessary steps to put the company back on a path to growth, innovation, blah, blah, blah. They want to radically evolve the mindset, and they're doing targeted restructuring when necessary. I know the situation brings questions and expectations, and we will share regular and transparent updates. Again, talk. It's all talk, but these are internal memos, and that's something that I do want to bring up, even if it's briefly, that, look, as time goes on and Ubisoft continues to sink, I think a lot of us, including myself slowly, to be honest, start to feel like good riddance. Like, what do these guys really bring to the table? But the most important part of game development at the end of the day, of pretty much anything like this, is the individuals. If you have talent there with great ideas and the ability to execute on them. And everybody at Ubisoft, including the people who do want to make great games, who do have great ideas, we've seen it with different internal teams, stuff like the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown team, and how that got dissolved and thrown into other teams kind of like as a punishment for making an actual good game or something. These people are fearing every day that they're going to lose their jobs or not knowing what's going to happen to them. And I don't know if any of you watching have been in a situation like that, but I have, and it's not fun. It's not a good experience. It is psychologically draining. And I have experienced that in jobs that I didn't like. I can't even begin to imagine what it must feel like for people who feel like they're at their dream jobs. Because at least from what I know, nobody really gets into game development to buy a big house. Unless you're a directive, that's not really how gaming works. And that, to me, sad. And I'll keep saying it. If Ubisoft closes down, I just hope that all of the talent is saved and goes to make great games elsewhere. So this is just, unfortunately, another casualty of the situation that Ubisoft has dragged itself into. And of course, the people paying the price are not the big directors, but hey, they're talking about restructuring, about eliminating processes that aren't needed, about refocusing. Maybe they do it in time. Who knows? It doesn't feel like that's possible anymore, but stranger things have happened. Now, shifting back to XDefiant itself, it was, in my opinion, as I said before, a pretty enjoyable game, and one that had a pretty decent business plan. It was targeting a niche. It made sense to compete, not just to compete against Call of Duty, because that would be dumb, but its gimmick of skill-based matchmaking, the amount of different original takes that it had in it, I think that it was a pretty sensible decision, which is very rare in live service games. Let's get that very clear. And it did, at least during the betas and that initial period, have a pretty healthy player base. That's why I'm very surprised that they wouldn't at least give it that try on Steam and maybe reach the numbers necessary to keep it afloat, which some people think that if you don't reach like 100,000 players, your game is a failure in the live service industry, but that's not really true. It depends a lot on the budget and what your expectations for the game are, of course, but we've seen games like The Finals, which I think is a great parallel to something like XDefiant. It's kind of the Battlefield version of XDefiant in a way, where XDefiant is the Call of Duty one, that The Finals had a very explosive start. Again, we don't have public numbers, so we don't know how explosive XDefiant's beginnings were. And The Finals has managed to stabilize into an area where when you add up Steam players plus console players, it's probably around 30 to 40,000 of peak concurrency, maybe more every single day. We got to remember when we look at peak concurrent players, that means that across the entire day, there's probably 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 unique logins, people who just log in, play for an hour and a half. But it's had its ups and downs. It really dramatically dropped after that initial launch hype, and then it started to find its footing, enough footing to start promoting those seasons like this upcoming Season 3 of XDefiant. And as these games get more content, they get more things thrown into them, more support. As the players who are there get consistent quality content to keep playing through, they recommend it more, word of mouth spreads, and these games slowly but surely can find that footing. You just need to get to the part where you're stable enough. And they have Season 3 coming. They could have given it that one more season accompanied by a Steam launch or something. Now, to wrap up a lot of this, I did go and capture this footage. I did play this game again. I am one of the people who put in quite a lot of time into the betas, and I did put a little bit of time, maybe like 8 or 9 hours, into the full launch of the game. The game is in a terrible state, and I think that might be the saddest part about the whole thing, is that there's these dedicated players there that are not even getting a decent final send-off. It's really strange and disconcerting to go into a game and get an alert that the game is shutting down and still having the little banners on the side of like, new bundle, Season 3 coming soon, watch Pro Play, check out our YouTube channel for the latest stuff. But besides that, once you get in-game, you see all of these people with level 150, 170, things like that, with all of the different camos that they grinded, or with different bundles and skins from the store and stuff like that, which, depending on a number of different things, a lot of that is getting refunded to people. But to see all of these people who have invested so much into the game, and now the game is just going to die, and also you don't even have new people available to come in and kind of enjoy something that you enjoy in its final days. I wanted to record the mode that's kind of like payload, that's very different from Call of Duty, more something like Overwatch, kind of more focused on the abilities of each of the factions in the game, but I could not find the match to play it. So in order to actually play the game, I went to Domination and found some pretty decent success there. And once I got into game, the results were very bad. For starters, the game is kind of a mess on many different levels. Menus are not fluid. The game does not allow you to Alt-Tab a lot of the time. It depends. Sometimes I would launch it and it could function well, like you could Alt-Tab, and other times it was just locked in full screen and there was nothing you could do except close the game in order to go back to the rest of your computer. And I had to do that quite often because the problem that I encountered, the 5 times I had to restart the game in the maybe 3 hours that I spent playing it, I would hop into a match and it would tell me that I was using the wrong input, that I needed to use the input that I had selected, which was keyboard and mouse. And I could open up the settings and see that keyboard and mouse was selected, but it didn't let me play the game. However, if I turned on a gamepad, there I could play the game. Which is why some of the footage you've seen is just terrible, because I don't play shooters on gamepad. But this happened so often that like I just resigned myself to playing the game half and half, because I would jump into a game, be able to play with keyboard and mouse, immediately go into the next game, didn't touch anything, and it would tell me that I needed to use the gamepad. The worst and the funniest situations that happened though were when it told me that my input method was wrong, but it was only half of it. So my right stick on the gamepad wouldn't work. I would look with the mouse, but I couldn't like aim down sight or shoot with the mouse, and I couldn't move. So I needed to play with the gamepad like this in my hand and then look with this, this is not ideal. You can't crouch, you can't slide, you can't jump, you can't do anything. But I did, as a challenge for myself, I set the goal of at least getting a single elimination by using my right hand on my mouse and just moving my character like this and using my nose to shoot. I did not manage to do this. Most of the people playing XDefiant right now are more well-tuned and have their settings dialed in and stuff like that than me, who last played it when it launched and for like only 8 to 10 hours. But hey, at least I turned the situation into a fun little challenge. What was much less fun was that I encountered 2 different matches with cheaters or hackers or whatever you want to call them. But these people seem to be completely invisible and teleporting under the map if the silhouette of the kill cam, like after they kill you see where they are type of stuff. They were just teleporting everywhere and above and under. and they were also meleeing everybody to death, and then everybody would just leave the lobby. I don't know if I'm incredibly lucky or something. I play a ton of online multiplayer games, and hackers, in my experience, are very rare. I don't encounter them very often, so to encounter them here was very strange, just so back-to-back in a game that is just dead, but also not dead. I don't know if the anti-cheat is working, or if it never worked to begin with, or what the circumstance is, but it's just extra sad that if you are invested in this game, if you do enjoy this game, this is the state of matchmaking and the state of cheaters and hackers and all of that. It's honestly just sad. And the whole thing really shows how dire the situation is for Ubisoft, and how, I guess at this point, they have everything riding on Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I guess we will see. If you do have access to XDefiant, I unfortunately cannot recommend that you go play it if you had considered that. To be honest, I'm not sure why I'm surprised. I'm the person who keeps saying that, you know, good enough is not good enough anymore. You need to be excellent. But I really did feel like XDefiant had a fighting chance if they kept going with it, because it was one of those anomalies within Ubisoft where you're like, did you guys make this game? Why did you make this game? This is like kind of good and like makes sense. It's a shame. Once again, all the love that I can send out goes to the developers, and I hope that they find a future career path that is satisfactory to them. And I hope that no matter what happens throughout the entire thing with Ubisoft, that the people who got them into this mess, the people who pushed for the shareholders and for the profit and for the copy paste and for the extreme monetization, I hope those people get accurately punished. It might not happen, which is sad, but I'm holding out hope. In any case, I've been Mug, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, if you had a good time, if you learned something, hit the like button. That helps a ton. If you want more from me, news, reviews, retrospectives, all things gaming, subscribe. That helps the channel out a ton, and I promise to deliver good videos as often as possible. An extra special thanks to my patrons up on the $1 patron wall who support everything that I do directly. I am eternally grateful to them. Anyways, December is packed with great games, so go out there, enjoy some great games, and as always, I'll see you again very soon talking about some of those great games.